my 50 years of woodworking, I found it's the small stuff that makes all the difference, and it's those small tools that I reach for all the time. So here are 10 tools under $10 each that every woodworker needs to have. Number one on my list is a auto center punch, or automatic center punch. This is a center punch which will give you a starting point for drilling a hole. Now that's real common in metalworking, but it's not so common in woodworking. And I found a long time ago that if I could just make that little divot there, then I got a positive location for my drill bit, and my hole will end up where I want it to be. You can buy one of these for $9.99, and it's going to save you a lot of hassles. Number two on my list is a steel ruler. Now, a lot of people just use a tape measure, but the tape measure is actually a carpenter's tool, and it doesn't have the finesse that we need all the time in woodworking. Yeah, if you're measuring large things, that's great, but if you're trying to make small measurements, it's really hard to do with a tape measure. And tape measures have this horrible tendency of being inaccurate. Buy yourself a good stainless steel ruler, on the other hand, and not only do you have precision, but it's a lot easier to manage when you're working, say, trying to divide up the width of a board, say a 1x4. And I have a couple of these, and I've got them in different places around my shop because I always have one close by. You can buy steel rulers for a variety of different prices. This particular one, which, as I said, I've got a couple of, cost me $9.95. So it's right there in our $10 range, and really makes it a whole lot easier to lay things out. Item number three on my list is a good mechanical pencil. Now, I hear woodworkers all the time saying that they can't keep track of pencils, they lose them all the time, and I get that, okay? But if you get a good mechanical pencil and you get in the habit of putting it in your pocket, you always have it right there, okay? Oh, I don't have a pocket. Well, clip it into the button fly of your shirt. I mean, there's other things you can do to make sure you've always got it. Stick it in your back pocket. Why do I say mechanical pencils? Well, a mechanical pencil is going to give you a much sharper, finer line or point than a wood pencil is. Yeah, you sharpen that wood pencil, it's nice and sharp, but most of the time you're using it kind of dull. And so your line might be 1/16 of an inch wide. This one is 1/2 millimeter wide, so it's a lot finer. The other thing you want is a good eraser, because you will be erasing. Mistakes happen, right? And so count on needing to be able to erase those lines when you, or those tick marks when you put them in the wrong place. My next item is circle templates. Now these are, I have two different types of circle templates here, or two different sizes of circle template here, and I use these things all the time. You know, I see woodworkers all the time grabbing a spray can to do a radius on a corner, and that works, but you're limited to the size of the spray can. What if you want a different size? This gives you a whole selection of sizes to work with, and it's easy to work with. Now these can come in packages, but individually they cost about $6 to $8 a piece. And they'll last you pretty much forever. They're pretty durable. So that's a great investment for laying things out, especially if you need those curves, you know, like rounding corners, to make sure that you get things the way you want them to be. Item number 5 is a center finder. This is just an inexpensive plastic tool. I think they run about $5. And this is used for finding the center of the edge of a board. Like if you're going to drill holes for dowels, for example, okay? You put your pencil in there and you just run it down there and you've got a line. But it has another function too, which I find even more useful, and that's, you see how the edges of this are stepped? Each one of those steps is a different distance from the center bar here, okay? And what that allows us to do is take this, put it on the edge of a board, put our pencil there, and make a line that's, say, 3/8 of an inch from the edge. When would I want to do that? Okay, well, you're making a box out of 3/4 inch plywood. You got to put some screws in the corner. That's how you're going to hold it together. So you want those holes to be, or those screws to be 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Well, it helps to put a line there instead of trying to eyeball it. I've messed up more wood that way trying to eyeball that. So putting that line down there, using that notch, helps make sure that it comes out the way you want it to. So that little tool I find to be highly useful in a lot of different cases, but especially in trying to make sure I get my screws lined up where I want them to be. Item number 6 is a silicone glue brush. Now these are a fairly new item actually, and I've only had this for a couple of months. But this is great. You know, how do you spread the glue, right? And there's different things you can use to spread glue. You can use regular brushes, you can use your finger, you can use a roller. But these silicone glue brushes are great because when you've got to do, say, just like the edge of a board, they're just the right size. Being silicone, you just let the glue dry on there and then you can just break it off. It just peels right off. So that's a great tool. This particular one came from Rockler, but I'm sure there's other people that have them too. And I think I paid $6 for it. Now here's another one. This actually didn't start its life to be a silicone glue brush. This started its life to be a basting brush for cooking. And I found this at the dollar store, so it cost me a whole $1.25. And the bristles were too long, so I cut them down. But now it's essentially the same thing. It's also silicone, does the exact same job, nice and cheap. Item number 7, and I think one of the most important items on my list, are cauls. Now, what are cauls, right? Cauls are anything made of wood that help you clamping something up, okay? The technical definition is that they extend the reach of a clamp. But that's not what I'm really talking about here. What I'm talking about is using these when we're edge gluing panels, okay? Say I've got these 3 pieces of wood here that I'm going to make an edge glue panel out of. And we put these together and we put clamping pressure here, and there's a possibility of it bowing from the pressure, okay? This is where the cauls come in. So what I do is I put boards going across my joints and clamp the ends of this together, putting pressure on it to keep it flat. Actually, I want those clamps as close to the boards here as possible, not all the way out here. Nevertheless, the idea is the same, okay? So by doing that, I help keep it flat. I make sure I don't have ridges, steps up and down between, and that I don't get that bowing that can happen sometimes when you put too much pressure on. Cauls can be made out of just 2x2s. So you go to your local lumberyard and buy one 2x2, 8 feet long, cut in 4 pieces. You've got four 2-foot cauls, just like what I've got right here. Now, there are a couple things you want to do with this besides just doing that, okay? You want to take your caul and you want to bow the facing surface, the surface that's going to face the pieces of wood, just a tiny bit. And the way you do that is measure 6 inches back from one edge and hit it with a plane. Then measure 12 inches, hit it with a plane. 18, hit it with a plane. Same on the other side. So what I've done is I've taken steps, progressively steps, of more material out of it as we get closer to the edge. A minuscule amount of material, because we're talking here a shaving that's maybe 2/1000ths of an inch, all right? But what that does is helps make sure that there's going to be good pressure in the middle and not just on the edges. The other thing you want to do is you want to wax it so that the glue doesn't stick to it. Now I use just a block of beeswax for this. You could use an old candle. It doesn't matter what kind of wax it is, just as long as the surface and the sides are waxed. And that goes, of course, especially for the bottom one. So these will make it so that your glue-ups come out better. Item number 8 on my list is double-sided masking tape. Now you may not think of this as a tool because it's an expendable item, right? You use it and you throw it away. But nevertheless, it's still being used as a tool. I use double-sided masking tape for sticking things down to my bench top when I'm working on them. I use it for sticking parts together, like, for example, attaching a template to a piece of wood that I'm going to route the edge of. There's a lot of places where double-sided masking tape is extremely useful in the workshop, and really there are places that nothing else will quite do the same job. Now, there are some brands of this that get pretty expensive, but there are a few brands you can buy that are about $8 a roll. And a roll will last you quite a while, so it's a fairly good investment. Item number 9 on my list is a box of rubber gloves. Yes, rubber gloves. Now again, that may not seem like a tool because it's something expendable, but it helps you get the job done. Why rubber gloves? Especially for finishing, and even more especially for staining. Keeps you from getting it all over your hands. Some of that stuff doesn't clean up very well. Wearing a pair of rubber gloves, which really don't cost very much, will protect your hands, allow you to get the job done without turning your hand brown or something, okay? So I always keep rubber gloves around, both here in my main workshop and in the annex, and I use them extensively. Even so, a box which has 100 gloves in it will last me quite a while. The 10th and last item on my list here is push sticks for use on table saw or any power tool. Now a lot of people use these style push sticks, the plastic ones, and if you buy a table saw, it'll probably have one with it. I don't like these for 2 reasons. One is that the plastic can shatter. And if it does, you can lose half of that, and all of a sudden, instead of your hand being up here, your hand's down here. Not very safe, okay? The other is that I don't think they give you a really good grip on the wood that you're pushing. I prefer to make mine out of wood, and this is just scrap wood, so there's almost no cost here. Literally, the only cost is the rubber strip I bought that I staple onto the bottom here, which helps give me that good grip on that piece of wood I'm pushing, okay? You can make these in lots of different styles. I prefer something that allows me to give a downward pressure and forward pressure both. Both of these have a lip, a hook back here at the back end to catch on the back end of the wood. And they allow me to hold the wood down. This longer one is great when I'm trying to cut thin pieces because they tend to chatter. And this allows me to put the necessary pressure, downward pressure on the front end of that piece of wood to help keep it from chattering. So there's my 10 items, all of them under $10, and I think they're things that every woodworker needs in their shop.